You've tried. You've bent over backward. You've softened your tone, your words, your heart. You've believed that kindness, patience, and understanding would eventually reach them. Maybe you've thought, if I just keep giving, maybe they'll see me, maybe they'll change. But you know deep down, it doesn't work. No matter how much you give, no matter how much you do, they stay the same. They don't see you. They don't appreciate you. And that feeling, the quiet knowing frustration of being invisible, of being unheard, is starting to wear you down. It's like you're walking around with a silent wound, hoping for a change that never comes. And let me be clear, being nice, being the bigger person, it won't break through that wall, it won't heal that wound. But there is something that can, something that shifts everything. And it starts with you, with a simple, powerful choice that says, I am enough. I will not shrink for anyone. This is where your journey begins, not in waiting for them to change, but in realizing your worth, in finding your power again. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It's easy to get lost in the hope that kindness will eventually make a difference, that if we just give enough, we'll change the way someone sees us or change the way they treat us. But the truth is, when you're dealing with a narcissist, no amount of niceness, no amount of patience is ever going to reach them in the way you want it to. And if you've been in that kind of relationship, whether it's with a partner, a family member, or a friend, you know what that feels like. The exhaustion, the emotional confusion, the feeling of being trapped in a cycle that you can't seem to break. You give, and yet it's never enough. The more you try to make things right, the more invisible you become. It wears you down in ways that are hard to put into words. But here's the thing, it's not your fault. The problem isn't with what you're doing. It's that you're trying to change something that can't be changed by giving more of yourself. Today, I want to talk about how you can reclaim your power, because when you stop trying to please someone who will never see you for who you truly are, you can finally start seeing yourself the way you deserve. This is about setting boundaries, taking back your voice, and learning what real change looks like, starting with you. There's a quiet toll that comes with constantly trying to please someone who doesn't see you, someone who takes and takes, but never truly gives back. It's not just the obvious things, like the way they dismiss your needs or never acknowledge your efforts. It's the deeper emotional drain, the way it starts to chip away at how you see yourself. Over time, you start to believe that maybe you're not enough, maybe you're not worthy of being heard or loved for who you really are. You think, if I just keep trying, if I give a little more, maybe they'll change. But here's the hard truth, they won't. And the more you bend to meet their expectations, the more they'll expect you to bend. It's a cycle that leaves you empty. You might even find yourself stuck in a place where you've convinced yourself that this is the price of love, that love means sacrifice, that giving everything to someone else is just part of the deal. But in relationships with narcissists, that's not love. It's a manipulation. And the real cost, the one you don't see until it's too late, is the loss of yourself, your voice, your boundaries, your sense of peace. They all start to fade into the background until you barely recognize who you are anymore. The price of pleasing isn't just emotional exhaustion. It's the slow erosion of your self-worth. It's the way you start to feel invisible, like you're giving everything you have, but it's never enough. The truth is, narcissists are built to take. They feed off your need to please, to fix, to make everything okay. And no matter how much you try to make them see you, to make them care, you're only pouring from an empty cup. The more you give, the more they take, and the cycle never ends. So how do you break free? The first step is understanding that the problem isn't you. It's not about you not being enough or not trying hard enough. It's about the other person's inability to see you, to appreciate you for who you are. When you realize that it's like a weight lifts, you don't have to keep proving your worth to someone who will never see it. You don't have to keep sacrificing your happiness in hopes of receiving love in return. The real shift begins when you stop asking for their approval. Stop waiting for validation from someone who doesn't value it. This doesn't mean you stop caring about them. It means you stop caring about their treatment of you in a way that causes you harm. You start putting yourself first, not in a selfish way, but in a self-respecting way. You start recognizing that your peace, your worth, your happiness are not contingent on how they treat you. It's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. But every time you choose to stop pleasing, to stop trying to fix something that isn't broken in you, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Slowly, you'll see the difference. You'll start to feel like you have more to give, not because you've given everything you have, but because you've learned to take care of yourself first. And in that, you'll find freedom. Not the kind that depends on changing them, but the kind that comes from knowing you're enough just as you are. There's a quiet desperation in giving everything you have and still feeling like it's not enough. You give your time, your energy, your patience, and your love, hoping that somehow this time it will be different, that this time they'll see you, hear you, truly understand you. But instead of feeling closer, you feel further away. Instead of being seen, you feel invisible. Instead of being appreciated, you feel depleted. And no matter how much you give, how much you sacrifice, the other person doesn't change. The relationship doesn't improve. You keep giving, but they keep taking. And you're left wondering, what's wrong with me? Why is it never enough? The truth is, when you're in a relationship where you're constantly pouring from an empty cup, you start to lose sight of who you are. You stop listening to your own needs, your own voice, because you're so focused on fulfilling the needs of the other person. You begin to forget that your worth is not tied to how much you can give. You start to believe that if you're not giving more, you're somehow failing. And that belief, that constant pressure to be everything for someone else, slowly chips away at your sense of self. But here's the thing, giving more isn't the answer. In fact, it only deepens the cycle of frustration and disappointment. The more you give, the more you reinforce the idea that your value is in what you do for others, not who you are. You start to believe that love is something you must earn through sacrifice, that you must prove your worth by constantly being there for others, often at the expense of your own peace, your own sense of self. In relationships like this, the problem isn't that you're not giving enough, it's that you're giving from a place of emptiness. You're trying to fill a void that can never be filled by external validation. You're pouring into a cup that has no bottom. And in doing so, you end up giving away pieces of yourself until you don't even recognize who you are anymore. But here's the shift: your strength isn't in how much you can give, it's in how well you know yourself, how much you can honor your own boundaries, and how deeply you can trust that you are enough just as you are. Your worth isn't determined by how much you sacrifice, how much you give, or how much you endure. Your worth is inherent in who you are. The moment you start recognizing that, the moment you stop giving more in hopes of receiving more, you reclaim your power. Finding your strength in unseen places means trusting that your value doesn't depend on the approval of others. It means acknowledging that you deserve to be seen, heard, and loved, not for what you can do for someone else, but for who you are. You don't have to keep giving away parts of yourself to prove your love, your loyalty, or your worth. True strength comes from knowing that you are enough, just as you are. And that's when you stop chasing validation and start living in the fullness of your own being. It's not about giving less, it's about giving to yourself. When you begin to fill your own cup, when you stop looking for someone else to complete you, you'll find that you have more to offer, but this time it won't drain you. This time you'll be giving from a place of abundance, not scarcity. And when that happens, everything changes. You stop seeking validation in places where it can't be found, and you start honoring the person who deserves it the most, you. It's painful when you feel like you're invisible in the one place you need to feel seen. You try so hard to give, to show up, to be there for others, but somehow it feels like your efforts go unnoticed. It's like you're pouring into a well that never fills, like you're giving pieces of yourself but never getting anything back. The love you offer doesn't seem to reach the people you need it to. The things you do for others are either taken for granted or ignored entirely, and in the silence that follows, you start to question yourself. Am I not enough? Why can't they see me? That the truth is, when you're constantly giving to others, but never receiving the acknowledgement you need, it wears you down. It chips away at your confidence, at your sense of worth, until you're left wondering if you matter at all. And the worst part is, it becomes easy to internalize that neglect. You start thinking that if they can't see your worth, maybe it's because you don't have any. You stop trusting your own value, and little by little, you begin to shrink, becoming smaller and smaller, until you forget what it feels like to stand in your own strength. But here's the thing: you might not have realized your worth isn't tied to how others see you, how much they appreciate you, or whether they acknowledge what you do. Your value is inherent. It's a part of who you are, regardless of the response you get from others. It's not something that can be earned or validated by the approval of others. It's something that is simply there, waiting for you to recognize it. When you stop seeking validation outside of yourself, when you stop needing others to prove your worth, that's when you start to see your own strength. The issue isn't that you don't deserve to be seen. It's that you've allowed others' inability to recognize your value to make you question it. People who are incapable of seeing your worth aren't reflecting the truth about you. They're simply showing you their limitations. their inability to value others as they deserve. That's a reflection of them, not you. It's hard, I know, it's hard to keep showing up when it feels like no one else notices or appreciates what you're doing. But the real work, the real transformation comes when you stop relying on external validation to define your sense of self. Your worth is not something you need to fight for, beg for, or prove to anyone. It's something that has always been within you. And once you start recognizing it for yourself, you won't need anyone else to see it for you. The moment you begin to believe in your own worth, regardless of how others treat you, everything changes. You stop measuring your value by how much you give to others or how much they appreciate it. You stop expecting someone else to fill the gap that only you can fill. You start to trust yourself again, to stand in the fullness of who you are, even when the world around you doesn't acknowledge it. And let me tell you, when you recognize your own worth, when you truly start to believe it, that's when everything shifts. People might still fail to see you, but it won't matter. You'll stop needing them to. You'll find that the more you own your value, the more you begin to attract people who can see it too. The right people will start to recognize you for who you really are, not because you've earned their approval, but because you've already given it to yourself. There's something deeply unsettling about feeling like you're walking on eggshells in your own life. You have thoughts, feelings, and needs, but somehow, when it comes to expressing them, it's like there's a wall between you and the world around you. In a relationship that stifles your voice, you begin to lose track of your own words. You start to second guess yourself, to hold back, to wonder if what you feel even matters. It's like you've been made to feel that your voice is too much, too loud, or too inconvenient. And so you start to shrink. You begin to suppress what's inside, thinking that if you just stay quiet, stay calm, stay small, maybe the tension will disappear. But here's the thing, silencing yourself doesn't make the tension go away. It just makes you invisible, and with every silent moment, a little more of your true self fades into the background. When you've been in a relationship where your voice is stifled, it's easy to convince yourself that your feelings don't matter, that your perspective isn't valid. You might tell yourself that it's easier to just go along with what they want, to keep the peace, to keep things from escalating. But what you're really doing is slowly chipping away at your own self-worth. You're telling yourself that you don't deserve to be heard, that your needs are secondary, that your truth isn't worth sharing. The truth is, though, when we lose our voice, we lose our sense of self. We forget who we are, what we stand for, and what we're capable of. And in those moments, it's easy to feel like we've given everything up, like we're stuck in a relationship that doesn't leave room for us to be fully ourselves. But you don't have to keep silencing yourself. Your voice matters, your thoughts matter. You are not a background character in someone else's story. You deserve to speak your truth, to express your feelings, and to have your needs acknowledged just like anyone else. Reclaiming your voice doesn't mean shouting over the other person or forcing your way into every conversation. It's about recognizing that your perspective is just as valid, just as important. It's about saying, I deserve to be heard without apology, without shame. It's about giving yourself permission to speak up, to set boundaries, to share your thoughts, even when it feels difficult. I know it's hard. I know it feels risky, because when you've been silenced for so long, it's easy to think that speaking up will make things worse, that it will lead to conflict, rejection, or worse, complete disconnection. But the reality is, staying silent doesn't keep the peace. It keeps you in a state of quiet resentment, of emotional disconnection. You're not doing yourself or your relationship any favors by pretending that your voice doesn't matter. Reclaiming your voice starts with small steps, speaking up in little ways, letting yourself be heard in moments where you've previously stayed silent. It's setting boundaries and voicing your needs, even if it feels uncomfortable. It's trusting that your feelings are worth expressing and that you deserve to be seen and heard just as you are. And yes, it can be scary at first, but every time you speak your truth, every time you assert yourself, you strengthen that connection to your own power. You start to remember who you are. And here's the beautiful thing, when you reclaim your voice, you reclaim your freedom. You stop living in a relationship where you feel suffocated or erased. You start to live in a space where your truth is honored, where you can be your full, authentic self. Reclaiming your voice isn't just about standing up for yourself. It's about standing up for the person you've always been, the person who deserves to be heard, respected, and loved. There's a quiet desperation that comes with constantly seeking approval, constantly measuring yourself against someone else's expectations, hoping for validation that never seems to come. It starts innocently enough. You want to be loved, you want to be seen, and you want to feel like you matter. But when you find yourself consistently chasing after someone else's approval, something shifts. It becomes less about sharing who you truly are and more about changing yourself to fit their needs, their desires, their vision of you. Slowly, you stop living for yourself and start living for someone else's approval, always waiting for that next moment of recognition, always hoping that this time it will be enough. The problem is, no matter how much you give, no matter how hard you try, it's never truly enough. There's always something more to do, another thing to prove, another expectation to meet. And each time you fall short, you feel that familiar sting of rejection, the quiet sense that no matter what you do, you're not enough as you are. The truth is, you'll never win in this game of chasing approval because it's not a game you're meant to play. You're chasing something that can't be given, something that's fleeting and conditional. And in the process, you lose yourself. You start to lose track of who you are, what you believe in, what you need, all because you've been so focused on meeting someone else's expectations. But here's the hard truth: no one can fill the emptiness of constantly needing approval except you. When you don't set boundaries, when you allow yourself to be shaped by someone else's perception of you, you're allowing them to take the power to define you. You're allowing them to set the rules of the relationship. And what happens is you start bending yourself into shapes that don't fit. You start becoming someone you don't even recognize, all because you're trying to get something that was never yours to begin with. The power to approve of yourself, to acknowledge your own worth, must come from within. Boundaries aren't about building walls or shutting people out. They're about creating space where you can stand in your own truth, where you don't need to beg for validation or approval. Boundaries are about recognizing that you are worthy of love and respect without having to perform for it. You deserve to be seen, to be loved, and to be heard, not because you earned it by meeting someone else's expectations, but because you are inherently valuable. When you start setting boundaries, you stop seeking permission to exist as you are. You stop chasing approval from people who can never give you enough, because you realize that the only approval you need is your own. It's a shift that's not always easy, especially when you've spent so much time trying to please others. But reclaiming your power starts with realizing that you don't have to beg for love, respect, or recognition. You don't have to keep giving pieces of yourself just to prove you're worthy of being treated well. Setting boundaries isn't about closing doors. It's about opening up to yourself, to your own needs, to your own worth. It's about saying, I am enough just as I am, and I will not shrink to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. When you stop chasing approval, you stop living in a constant state of longing, of never feeling quite good enough. Instead, you start living in a space where you can breathe freely, where you can be authentic without fear of rejection. You begin to trust yourself again, knowing that your worth doesn't come from how others see you, but from how you see yourself. And when you step into that truth, when you finally start setting boundaries and standing in your own worth, something incredible happens. You stop begging for approval and you start living in a way that naturally attracts the love and respect you deserve. There's a quiet pain in being overlooked. It's not the loud, obvious kind of hurt that everyone can see. It's the kind that sits in the background, whispering that you don't matter, that your feelings don't count, that you're invisible. It's the little moments when you speak and your words get lost in the air, when you give your best and feel like it's taken for granted. You try to be seen, you try to be heard, but it feels like you're not. And the more this happens, the more you start to believe that maybe you don't deserve to be seen. Maybe you're just not important enough to be noticed. This kind of emotional neglect doesn't always look like what we think it does. It's not always about someone outright rejecting you or being intentionally cruel. Often it's the absence of what you need, the absence of attention, the absence of understanding, the absence of care. It's the moments when your needs are brushed aside, when your emotions are ignored, when the love you give isn't reflected back to you. And what happens over time is that you begin to shrink in these spaces. You stop asking for what you need, not because you've stopped needing it, but because you've learned that asking doesn't get you anywhere. It's like you've become used to living in the shadows, to being just a quiet observer in your own life. And that's where the real toll starts. When you're constantly overlooked, something inside you begins to wither. You start to believe that your presence doesn't matter, that your feelings aren't worth acknowledging. You put everyone else first, but who's left to put you first? Slowly, you lose track of what it feels like to be truly seen, to be acknowledged for who you are, to be loved in a way that affirms your worth. The emotional neglect doesn't just leave you feeling empty, it leaves you doubting your value. And that doubt creeps in, affecting every part of your life. You start questioning your worth in all relationships, not just the ones where you're being overlooked. You start to think that maybe you're asking too much, that maybe your needs are too big, or that maybe you're too much to handle. But here's what I need you to understand: being overlooked doesn't reflect your worth, it reflects the limitations of the person doing the overlooking. When someone can't see you, when they can't hear you, it's not about your value, it's about their inability to recognize it. People who overlook you aren't defining who you are, you are. And the moment you stop letting their inability to value you define your sense of self, something starts to shift. The healing begins when you realize that your worth isn't dependent on someone else's recognition. It's inherent in who you are, regardless of whether or not someone else sees it. Healing from emotional neglect starts with learning to see yourself again. It's about reintroducing yourself to your own needs, your own desires, and your own voice. It's about giving yourself the validation you've been waiting for from others. You don't need someone else's approval to feel worthy. You don't need anyone else to tell you that you matter. You matter simply because you exist. And once you start acknowledging that for yourself, once you start filling your own emotional needs, you begin to rebuild what was broken. The pain of being overlooked doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to be the story of who you are. It's part of your past, but it doesn't have to be part of your future. You can start to heal by stepping into your own strength, by recognizing that you are worthy of being seen, heard, and loved. It's not about waiting for others to change. It's about changing the way you see yourself. When you stop waiting for the validation that has been missing, when you start giving it to yourself, you'll find that the silent toll of emotional neglect begins to lose its hold. You'll start to stand taller, breathe easier, and realize that you've always been enough. There's a kind of love that, at first glance, seems so beautiful, so deep, so intense. But over time, you begin to realize it's not really love at all. It's a demand, an expectation, a weight that you can never quite carry. It's the love that asks you to give more than you have, to sacrifice more than is healthy, to lose more of yourself than you ever imagined. And the hardest part is, it's not always clear. In the beginning, you might feel flattered, even cherished by how much they seem to need you. But little by little, that need turns into something that takes, and what you're left with isn't fulfillment, it's exhaustion. You find yourself constantly bending, constantly adjusting to fit their needs, their desires, their moods. You tell yourself that this is what love is: compromise, sacrifice, putting someone else's needs before your own. But the truth is, love should never make you feel small. It should never make you feel like you're losing yourself just to keep someone else happy. Love that demands too much doesn't nourish you, it drains you. And eventually the price of that love becomes too high. You realize you're giving everything you have, but it's never enough. You're giving your time, your energy, your peace of mind, your very essence, but it doesn't fill the hole that's been created. Instead, it leaves you feeling hollow, empty, and unseen. At some point, you begin to feel resentful, not just of the person you're giving so much to, but of yourself for allowing it to go on for so long. You start to question why you keep sacrificing, why you keep giving, even when it feels like you're losing yourself in the process. The truth is, somewhere along the way, you forgot to love yourself. You started to believe that loving someone else meant giving up your own needs, your own voice, your own boundaries. You started to measure your worth by how much you could give, how much you could do, and how much you could sacrifice. But that's not love, it's self-neglect. The hard truth is that love that demands too much isn't sustainable. It's not healthy, and it's not real. True love isn't about losing yourself for someone else. It's about two people coming together, both bringing their whole selves into the relationship. It's about respecting each other's boundaries, honoring each other's needs, and recognizing that each person's well-being matters equally. When love becomes one-sided, when it becomes about giving without receiving, something essential is missing. And that's when you start to feel like you're drowning in a love that should be lifting you up. Here's the shift: love starts with you. It starts with knowing that your needs, your feelings, your voice matter just as much as anyone else's. It starts with setting boundaries and understanding that you don't have to give everything to prove your love. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to make someone else happy. True love isn't about giving until you have nothing left. It's about giving from a place of fullness, from a place where you know you're worthy of love and respect, and you don't have to lose yourself to receive it. When you stop allowing yourself to be drained by love that demands too much, you start to see the truth. You start to see that you deserve a love that nourishes, a love that respects you, a love that supports you in being your whole, authentic self. And when you step into that truth, you begin to heal. You stop settling for love that depletes you, and you start building a relationship with yourself that is whole, strong, and rooted in self-respect. Only then can you truly give and receive love in a way that fills you up, rather than leaving you empty.